This 4-year-old beggar girl is beaten by her own grandfather in the middle of the street. But a millionaire sees everything and does something. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel. To support my work, your help is very important. The scorching sun of Phoenix, Arizona, beat down on the concrete of Central Avenue Park when the shouts echoed among the sparse desert landscaping. Isabella "Izzy" Sullivan, barely 6 years old, cowered against a park bench, her big, scared eyes fixed on the red-faced man approaching. "Worthless, good for nothing!" Frank Miller raised his calloused hand, ready to deliver another blow to the frail child. 2 hours begging, and that's all you got? The scattered coins on the ground didn't even add up to $5. Izzy trembled, protecting her face with her skinny arms, bracing for the pain she knew so well. Her threadbare clothes, a faded floral dress that had once been pink, were stained with dust and sweat. "Please, Gramps, I tried." The girl's voice came out as a broken whisper. "Tried. A cute girl like you should be able to get a lot more. People feel sorry for kids." Frank, a 73-year-old man with graying hair and a face etched with time and bitterness, clenched his fists. "Your mom works like a dog as a cleaning lady, and you can't even manage this." Across the park, near the dry fountain that once decorated the city center, Arthur Macmillan stopped walking. The 52-year-old businessman, wearing a crisp white dress shirt and dark slacks, watched the scene with growing outrage. His usually serene brown eyes now shone with a contained anger he rarely allowed himself to show. Arthur knew that feeling, the helplessness in the face of someone else's suffering. The same feeling he had months ago when he couldn't save Claire, his wife, from the illness that slowly consumed her. But this time it was different. This time he could act. "Sir!" Arthur's firm voice cut through the hot afternoon air. His footsteps echoed on the uneven stone paving as he approached. "What's going on here?" Frank turned, surprised by the interruption. His small, suspicious eyes sized up the well-dressed man approaching. Quickly, like an experienced actor, he changed his posture and expression. "Oh, officer, sorry for the noise." Frank lowered his voice, trying to sound respectful. "It's my granddaughter, you know how it is. Stubborn child, just trying to teach her some manners." Izzy looked up, and Arthur felt his heart clench. The girl's eyes were big and expressive, but they carried a deep fear that no child should know. There was something else there too, a surprising intelligence, as if she were constantly analyzing everything around her, calculating dangers, looking for exits. "Manners?" Arthur crouched down to Izzy's level, keeping his distance so as not to scare her further. "What's your name, sweetie?" Izzy," she replied softly, still trembling. "Pretty name." Arthur smiled gently, then stood up to face Frank. "And you are?" "Frank Miller, at your service. I'm the girl's grandpa." The man extended his hand, which Arthur shook briefly. "We live just down the street, in the projects. Life is tough, officer, you understand." Arthur observed the details. Frank's mended clothes, the smell of cheap liquor on his breath, the trembling hands that betrayed both addiction and nervousness. But it was the calculating look that bothered him most, as if the man were assessing the value of his clothes, his watch, his possibilities. "What do you do for work, Frank?" Officer, it's not that I don't want to work, but age has caught up with me, you know. 73 years on my back. I do odd jobs here and there, carry things at the market." Frank scratched his head. "But it's hard. That's why the girl helps out, you know. Asks folks for a little help." "I see." Arthur felt a knot in his stomach. He knew that dynamic well. A child being used to arouse pity and get money. And Izzy's parents. "Just her mum, officer. My daughter, Sarah, works as a cleaning lady. But what she earns barely covers the rent." Frank sighed dramatically. "This world is hard on the poor." Izzy remained silent, but Arthur noticed how she observed every word, every expression. The girl was learning, even so young, to read people's intentions. It was a survival skill that no child should need to develop. An idea began to form in Arthur's mind. It was impulsive, maybe even reckless, but something inside him couldn't just walk away and pretend he hadn't seen anything. "Frank, how about we talk? I have a proposal. That might interest you." Frank's eyes lit up with immediate interest. "A proposal, officer?" "I need someone to take care of the garden at my house. It's a large property, needs constant maintenance." Arthur crossed his arms. "I pay well, including food for the employee and family." The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Frank clearly wasn't expecting that, and Arthur could see the calculations forming in the man's mind. Izzy, in turn, looked between the two adults with an expression that mixed hope and suspicion. Are you serious, officer?" "Completely serious, but I have one important condition." Arthur looked directly at Izzy. "The girl comes with you. I don't want to see any more children begging on the street when they should be playing." Frank hesitated, and in that hesitation, Arthur saw something that disturbed him deeply. The man wasn't calculating the benefit to his granddaughter. He was assessing how he could use the situation to his advantage. Frank's hesitation lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough for Arthur to realize that there was something wrong with that family dynamic. The man finally smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, officer. I accept the proposal. The girl will be well taken care of, you can be sure." Frank bent down and pulled Izzy by the arm, harder than necessary. "Right, sweetheart, we're going to live in a nice house." Izzy just nodded, but Arthur noticed how she flinched on the shoulder where her grandfather touched her. Every gesture of the child revealed years of accumulated fear, and that made the businessman's determination even stronger. "Great, I'll give you my address, and I expect you there early tomorrow morning." Arthur took a business card from his pocket and handed it to Frank. "My house is on Camelback Mountain. It's the only house with a black iron gate on the street." Frank put the card away with exaggerated care, as if it were made of gold. "You got it, officer. We'll be there bright and early. Thanks for the opportunity." As Arthur walked away, Frank waited until he was sure the man couldn't hear them anymore. Then his expression changed completely. The smile disappeared, replaced by a calculating look that made Izzy shrink even further. "See, brat?" Frank whispered, gripping the girl's arm tightly. "Sometimes things work out, but don't think that changes anything. You're still going to obey me, got it?" Izzy nodded quickly, her eyes full of tears that she refused to shed. She had already learned that crying only made things worse. The next morning, Arthur watched from his window as Frank and Izzy walked down the street. The mansion on Camelback Mountain was truly imposing. 3 stories, manicured gardens, and a pool that sparkled in the morning sun. For a child who lived in a 2-room shack in the projects, it must have looked like a palace. "Dad, are you sure about this?" Melissa Macmillan came down the stairs, her 16 years evident in her distrustful posture and questioning gaze. She had inherited her mother's delicate features, but her father's strong personality. "You don't know these people. What if it's dangerous?" "Melissa, it's a 6-year-old child and an elderly man. What danger could there be?" Arthur adjusted his shirt. "Besides, you saw how that man treated the girl yesterday. I can't pretend I didn't see it." "Dad," Melissa sighed. "You're still hurting over Mom. I don't want you getting into trouble trying to save everyone." His daughter's words hit Arthur like a well-aimed dagger. It was true. Since Claire died 2 years ago, he had felt guilty for not being able to save her. The doctor said they did everything they could, but Arthur knew he could have done more, sought out more specialists, spent more money. What he didn't tell anyone was that he had already spent almost everything. His irrigation company, once thriving, was now struggling to stay afloat after the astronomical medical expenses. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Frank was at the gate, holding a worn plastic bag, with Izzy by his side. The girl was wearing the same clothes as the day before, but at least she seemed to have taken a bath. "Good morning, officer." Frank waved energetically. "We're here early, as promised." Arthur opened the gate and greeted them. Izzy looked at everything with wide eyes. The garden with its well-kept plants, the functioning fountain, the colourful flowers that contrasted with the desert landscape around them. "What a pretty place," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. "You like it?" Arthur smiled. "You can play in the garden whenever you want. There's a special play area for kids in the back." "Really?" Izzy's eyes lit up with a timid joy that quickly faded when she realized she had spoken too loudly. She looked at Frank, expecting a reprimand. "Of course you can, sweetheart." Frank forced a smile. "The officer is very kind to us." Arthur showed them around the house, showing Frank where he would sleep, a simple but comfortable servant's room, and explaining the gardening tasks. Izzy could stay in the room next door, which had been used for storage. "And the girl's mother?" Arthur asked as they walked. "When will she be here?" "Ah, officer, Sarah works as a cleaning lady for a cleaning company. She cleans in different places." Frank scratched his head. "She comes on weekends to visit the girl. Sometimes she stays a few days when she doesn't have work." It was a lie. Arthur could tell by the way Izzy lowered her head. The child knew that her grandfather was lying, and that bothered him deeply. Melissa appeared in the kitchen when they passed by. She greeted Frank politely, but when she saw Izzy, her expression changed. There was something in the girl's fragility that touched, a protective instinct she didn't even know she possessed. "Hi." Melissa crouched down to Izzy's level. "I'm Melissa. How old are you?" 6 years old, Izzy replied softly. "Can you read?" "Yes." For the first time, a glimmer of pride appeared in the girl's eyes. "I taught myself, looking at the signs." On the street, Melissa and Arthur exchanged surprised looks. A 6-year-old who taught herself to read was not common, especially in a poor family. "That's so cool. Do you like stories?" Melissa asked. "I like them a lot, but I don't have any books." "Well, now you have a whole library at your disposal." Melissa pointed to the living room. "My dad collects books." During the first few weeks, Izzy slowly adapted to the new routine. She woke up early, ate a full breakfast, something that rarely happened before, and spent the mornings playing in the garden while Frank took care of the plants. But Arthur began to notice strange behaviors. Frank was attentive and hard-working when he was being watched, but there were times when the businessman caught cold looks directed at Izzy, harsh whispers when they thought no one was listening. One afternoon, while working in his office, Arthur heard raised voices coming from the garden. Discreetly, he approached the window and saw Frank grabbing Izzy's arm tightly. "Don't forget who's in charge here, brat. This fancy house doesn't change anything. You still owe me obedience and respect." Frank's voice was low but full of threat. "And don't you dare tell the officer anything. If you do, you know what will happen." Izzy nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. At that moment, Arthur understood that there was much more going on there than he imagined. The child was not only being mistreated, she was being psychologically terrorized. But what disturbed him most was the feeling that Frank wasn't just an overly strict grandfather. There was something calculated in his movements, as if he were planning something bigger. 2 weeks after Izzy arrived, the house routine had been established, but so had the tensions. Arthur discreetly observed Frank's behaviors, which were beginning to form a disturbing pattern. The man always seemed to be paying attention to details that a common gardener wouldn't: resident schedules, telephones ringing, visits arriving. It was Thursday when Sarah Sullivan finally appeared. Arthur was in his office when he heard the gate open and a female voice calling for Izzy. Through the window, he saw a 34-year-old woman, thin and with a face etched with fatigue, wearing a faded cleaning lady uniform. "Mom!" Izzy ran through the garden and threw herself into Sarah's arms, who hugged her with a desperate intensity, as if she feared her daughter might disappear at any moment. "My little one, how are you?" Sarah examined her daughter's face, gently, touching her hair that was now clean and combed. "You've grown, and you're chubbier." "I'm eating well, Mom. There's food every day." Izzy spoke with a contained joy, but her eyes remained watchful, checking where Frank was. Arthur went down to greet Sarah. Up close, he could see that she was younger than she looked. The hard life had aged her face prematurely. But there was something in her eyes that impressed him, a living, almost desperate intelligence, as if she were constantly calculating ways to protect her daughter. "Thank you so much, officer," Sarah said, her hands trembling slightly. "From what Dad told me, you've been very good to Izzy." "She's a special child," Arthur replied sincerely. "Very intelligent. Melissa has been spending whole afternoons reading. With her," Sarah's face lit up with maternal pride. "She's always been smart. She taught herself to read, you know. I didn't have the opportunity to study properly. I got pregnant very young." Her voice faltered, and she looked at the ground. "I always wanted to be a teacher." "It's never too late to start over," Arthur said gently. "For me, it is." The reply came quickly, loaded with a resignation that broke Arthur's heart. "A woman like me doesn't get a second chance." Frank appeared at that moment, and Arthur noticed how Sarah immediately changed her posture. Her shoulders slumped. Her voice became lower, as if she were automatically shrinking in her father's presence. "You're here, Sarah?" Frank didn't show any joy in seeing her. "I thought you were only coming on Sunday." "I got a day off today. I wanted to see how Izzy is adjusting." Sarah looked around, clearly impressed with the house, but also uncomfortable. "It's very beautiful here." "It is," Frank agreed, but Arthur caught a strange tone in his voice. "The officer has a very good life. Big house, fancy car, thriving company." His eyes fixed on Arthur with an intensity that made him feel uneasy. During dinner, Arthur observed the family dynamic. Sarah barely ate, constantly checking if Izzy was behaving properly. Frank dominated the conversation, asking seemingly innocent questions about Arthur's company, his clients, his routine. "The officer must know a lot of important people in town," Frank commented as he cut his steak. "Businessmen, politicians." "I know a few people, yes," Arthur replied cautiously. "Must have access to privileged information, lucrative deals," Frank insisted. Melissa, who had been eating silently until then, looked up. There was something about the way the old man was asking these questions that bothered her. Her father also seemed tense. "Dad works with irrigation," Melissa said dryly. "It's not exactly a world of secrets." Frank laughed, but the sound had no humor. Of course. Just an old man's curiosity." After dinner, Sarah asked to talk to Izzy alone. Arthur saw them in the garden, mother and daughter sitting on the bench near the fountain. Sarah spoke softly, holding Izzy's small hands, and he could see tears in both of their eyes. "Mom has to leave again?" Izzy asked, her voice filled with a sadness that a 6-year-old shouldn't know. "I have to work, my love, but you're safe here, aren't you?" Sarah stroked her daughter's face. "The officer and Melissa are good people. And Gramps?" Sarah hesitated, and in that hesitation Arthur saw a world of fear and conflict. "Gramps, he takes care of you the way he knows how. Just obey him, okay? Don't cause trouble." "Okay, Mom." Later that night, Arthur was in his office when he heard raised voices coming from the servants' quarters. Discreetly, he approached and managed to hear parts of the argument between Sarah and Frank. "Can't keep doing this, Dad." Sarah's voice was whispered but desperate. "She's a child. You don't give me orders, girl." Frank's reply was curt. "You ruined your life and ours when you decided to spread your legs without thinking. Now we have a golden opportunity here." "Opportunity? What are you talking about?" "This man is rich, Sarah, really rich. You don't buy a house like this with a regular worker's salary. And he likes the girl, that's obvious. Dad, what are you planning? I'm planning our survival. You think his kindness will last forever? One day he'll get tired of playing savior. And then what? Are we going back to that pigsty we call home? Arthur felt a chill. His suspicions were being confirmed. Frank wasn't just taking advantage of the situation. He was planning something. I won't let you use Izzy in any scheme. Sarah spoke louder and quickly lowered her voice again. Enough of what she's been through. You have no choice. Frank's voice became dangerously low. Either you cooperate, or I'll tell everyone what you really are. How many men have been through your bed? How many times have you left the girl alone to go out there? That's not true. Who's going to believe you? A nobody from the projects against a respected man like me. The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Arthur realized that he was witnessing an emotional blackmail that had probably lasted for years. Frank controlled Sarah through guilt and threat, using her own vulnerability against her. You have 3 days to think, Frank continued. Either you help me get what I want, or I take the girl away from here, and you'll never see her again. No! Sarah's muffled cry was cut short quickly. Please, Dad, don't do this to her. She's happy here for the first time in her life. Then you know what you have to do. Arthur walked away silently, his heart pounding. Now he understood why Sarah seemed so terrified and submissive. She wasn't just an absent mother. She was a woman being manipulated and blackmailed by her own father, who used Izzy as a weapon. But what scared him most was realizing that he and his family had become targets of some plan devised by Frank. A plan that somehow would put Izzy at the center of everything. In the days following Sarah's visit, Izzy began to show signs of change. For the first time since she arrived, she laughed genuinely while playing in the garden with Melissa. The sound of childish laughter echoed through the house like music, touching Arthur's heart deeply as he watched from his office window. Look, Melissa. Izzy pointed to a butterfly that had landed on one of the rose bushes. What beautiful colors. It's a monarch butterfly, Melissa explained, crouching next to the girl. They fly long distances to find a safe place. Like me, Izzy whispered, unaware of the depth of her words. Melissa felt her heart clench. In recent days, she had developed a genuine affection for the girl. Izzy was curious, intelligent, and when she felt safe, she showed a captivating personality that had been stifled by fear. You're safe here, Melissa said softly. No one will hurt you. But that feeling of safety would be shaken that same afternoon. Frank, who had been watching the growing closeness between Izzy and the Macmillan family, decided it was time to act. While Arthur was in a business meeting and Melissa had left for school, Frank approached Izzy, who was playing alone in the garden. Izzy. His voice was low, loaded with the threatening authority that the girl knew so well. I need to talk to you. The joy immediately disappeared from the child's face. She dropped the doll that Melissa had given her and stood up, her hands trembling. You're forgetting who you are, Frank continued, walking slowly around her like a predator. You're forgetting where you came from, thinking you're a rich girl, aren't you? No, Gramps, Izzy replied quickly, her voice almost inaudible. Don't lie to me. Frank grabbed her arm tightly. I see how you look at these pretty things, how you laugh with this spoiled girl. You think they really care about you. Tears began to stream down Izzy's face, but she didn't dare wipe them away. They're just playing with you, you silly, and when they get tired of it, they'll throw you away like garbage, just like everyone always has. Frank crouched down, his face close to hers. But I have a way to make sure they never send us away. You're going to help me. How? The question came out without Izzy being able to stop it. You're going to pay attention to everything, to the officer's phone calls, to the letters that arrive, to the conversations he has with other people, and you're going to tell me everything later. But that's not right. The answer cost Izzy a slap in the face that knocked her to the ground. The physical pain was less than the shock. Frank had never been so violent with her when they were in Arthur's house. "Right," Frank laughed bitterly. "You think it was right for your mother to abandon you with an old man to work as a cleaning lady? You think it was right to be born into a poor family? Life isn't fair, girl. We have to take what's ours." Izzy remained on the ground, holding her sore face. For the first time in weeks, the old fear returned in full force. "If you don't help me," Frank continued, "I'll tell the officer that you stole money from him. I'll say that I taught you to steal, that you can't be trusted. Then he'll send us away and you'll go back to the street. I never stole anything. But who are they going to believe, me or you? A respected 73-year-old man or a girl from a poor family?" At that moment, Izzy understood that she was in a trap. There was no way out that wouldn't result in suffering. If she obeyed Frank, she would be betraying the people who had been kind to her. If she disobeyed, she would lose the first place where she had felt safe in her entire life. "You have until tomorrow to decide," Frank said, walking away. "And don't even think about telling them about our conversation. Who's going to believe a liar like you?" When Melissa returned from school, she found Izzy quiet and withdrawn, the cheerful behavior of the morning completely gone. The girl barely touched her dinner and answered questions with monosyllables. "Are you okay?" Melissa asked when they were alone in the living room. Izzy looked at Frank, who was watching them from the kitchen, and nodded quickly. "I'm just tired." But Melissa wasn't naive. She had grown up watching her mother's mood swings during her illness, and she knew how to recognize when someone was suffering in silence. Besides, she had noticed a red mark on Izzy's face that definitely wasn't there in the morning. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Melissa got up and went to Izzy's room. She found the girl awake, curled up in bed, staring blankly out the window. "Izzy," Melissa whispered, "can I come in?" Izzy sat up in bed, surprised. "You shouldn't be here. If Gramps finds out, what's he going to find out?" Melissa sat on the edge of the bed. "Did something happen today?" Izzy's internal conflict was visible. She desperately wanted to tell Melissa everything, but the fear of what Frank might do was greater. I just want my mom to come back," she said finally, starting to cry silently. "Hey, it's okay." Melissa hugged her gently. "Your mom will come back, and you're safe here with us." "Am I?" Izzy raised her red eyes. "Promise you won't send me away?" "Why would we send you away? You're part of the family now." But even as she said those words, Melissa felt that there was something very wrong happening. Frank's behavior had been getting increasingly strange, and now Izzy was clearly terrified for some reason. The next morning, Arthur was in his office when he received an unexpected call. It was from Richard Santos, one of his biggest clients, owner of a mango farm near Bakersfield. "Arthur, I need to talk to you about some rumors that are circulating in town," Richard said, his voice tense. "What kind of rumors?" "About your company, about financial problems, unfulfilled contracts. Look, I trust you, but other clients are starting to question it." Arthur felt his stomach sink. "Richard, you know I've always fulfilled all my contracts. Where is this information coming from?" "I don't know for sure. It seems like someone is spreading gossip. I thought it was better to warn you before it gets bigger." After hanging up, Arthur was thoughtful. Rumors about his company popping up out of nowhere just now. It couldn't be a coincidence. Someone was deliberately trying to harm him, and he had a very strong suspicion of who it might be. At that moment, he looked out the window and saw Frank talking to an unknown man near the gate. They exchanged something, it looked like money, and the stranger quickly walked away. The puzzle was beginning to form in Arthur's mind, and the picture that emerged was much more sinister than he had imagined. The pressure on Izzy intensified in the following days. Frank approached her whenever they were alone, demanding information. About Arthur's conversations, his phone calls, the documents that arrived in the mail. The girl, terrified by the threats, began to develop a constant low fever that worried the whole family. "She's not well," Melissa told her father during breakfast. "On a Friday. She barely eats, she doesn't want to play, and last night I heard her crying." Arthur observed Izzy, who was listlessly playing with a piece of bread on her plate. The transformation of the cheerful girl of a few days ago into this haunted child was alarming. "Izzy," he called softly. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," she lied, without looking up from her plate. "Are you sure? You seem tired." Izzy glanced quickly at Frank, who was watching her with a threatening expression, and nodded. "Just a little tired." Arthur decided he needed to act. That afternoon, when Frank was busy in the backyard garden, he approached Izzy, who was sitting alone on the porch. "Can I sit with you?" he asked. Izzy nodded, but her body tensed. Arthur noticed how she constantly checked where Frank was, as if she expected to be caught doing something wrong. "You know, Izzy, when I was a child, I also went through difficult times," Arthur began, speaking calmly. "And I learned that sometimes the people who should protect us end up hurting us." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. "If someone is making you feel bad or scared, you can tell me. Nothing bad will happen to you, I promise." For a moment, Izzy seemed about to speak. Her mouth opened, the words almost coming out, but then she saw Frank appearing at the door and quickly shook her head. "No, officer. Everything's fine." But Arthur saw the fear in her eyes, and that confirmed his suspicions. Frank was terrorizing the child in some way. That same afternoon, the situation became even more complicated. Arthur received another call, this time from Martha Oliveira, owner of one of the largest wineries in the region. "Arthur, I need to cancel our irrigation contract," she said bluntly. "Cancel? But Martha, the project is almost finished. Only the installation of the main system is missing." "I know, but some worrying information has come to light about your company, about unpaid debts, defective equipment on other projects. Martha, that's not true. You can check all my references." "I already have, and some people have confirmed that you're going through serious financial difficulties. I can't take the risk." After hanging up, Arthur felt devastated. In 1 week, 2 important contracts had been questioned or cancelled. Someone was deliberately destroying his reputation, and he knew exactly who it was. That's when he decided to confront Frank directly. He found the man watering the plants near the pool, whistling cheerfully as if he didn't have a care in the world. "Frank, I need to talk to you." "Sure thing, officer. Always at your service." Frank smiled, but there was something fake about that smile. "I've been receiving information that someone is spreading rumors about my company around town. Stories about financial difficulties, poorly executed contracts." "That's terrible, officer." Frank shook his head in false sympathy. "There are a lot of jealous people in this world." "Indeed," Arthur crossed his arms. "And it's interesting how these rumors started just after you arrived here." Frank's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly regained his composure. "Are you accusing me of something, officer?" "I'm just observing interesting coincidences." "Look, officer." Frank dropped the hose and approached, his posture subtly shifting to something more menacing. "I understand that you're stressed about the problems in your business, but you shouldn't take it out on someone who's here to help." "Help?" Arthur laughed bitterly. "How exactly are you helping me?" "Taking care of your garden, keeping your property beautiful, and taking care of the girl, of course." Frank's eyes gleamed with a dangerous tone. "It would be a shame if something happened to her because of misunderstandings." The threat was subtle but clear. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. Frank was using Izzy as an emotional hostage, and now he was expanding his blackmail to include the girl's own safety. "What do you want?" Arthur asked directly. "Me? I don't want anything more than what I already have. A roof over my head, food, honest work." Frank smiled again, but now the smile was openly malicious. "But you know how it is. Life is expensive. A man my age needs to think about the future, about financial security." "How much?" "Let's say $5,000 a month, to ensure that I remain a discreet and loyal employee." Arthur felt the world spin. $5,000 was almost half of what was left of his net income. With the company already in trouble, that amount would drive him into complete bankruptcy in a few months. "And if I don't pay?" "Well, officer, it would be very sad if more clients knew about your financial problems. And it would be even sadder if something happened to little Izzy. Household accidents are so common with children." The threat to Izzy was the last straw. Arthur took a step forward, his fists clenched, but Frank raised his hands in false surrender. "Calm down, officer. No need for violence. We're civilized men." He backed away slowly. "You have until Monday to think. I'm sure you'll make the right decision." That night, Arthur barely managed to sleep. He was trapped in a trap that seemed to have no way out. If he paid the blackmail, he would be admitting guilt and putting himself even more at Frank's mercy. If he didn't pay, the man would destroy his company, and worse yet, could harm Izzy. It was then that he heard a noise coming from the garden. Looking out the window, he saw a scene that confirmed his worst fears. Frank was talking to two people he didn't recognize, a man and a woman, both with a suspicious appearance. They exchanged documents and money, and the woman pointed to the house, clearly discussing details about the property. Arthur realized that he wasn't just dealing with a lone blackmailer. Frank was part of a larger network, and they had turned his house and his family into targets of a much more elaborate scheme than he had imagined. As he watched the nightly meeting, a certainty grew in his heart. He needed to protect Izzy at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had built. But first, he needed to find out exactly what Frank and his accomplices were planning, before it was too late. Sunday dawned tense at Arthur's house. The deadline given by Frank would expire on Monday, and the pressure was almost unbearable. Izzy was visibly ill, with a high fever and refusing to eat. Melissa insisted on taking her to the hospital, but Frank always found excuses to prevent it. "It's just a cold," he said with false concern. "Children have these things. It will pass." But when Izzy fainted during lunch, not even Frank could prevent her from being taken to the hospital. In the emergency room, doctors discovered something that shocked everyone: clear signs of chronic malnutrition and old marks of abuse on the girl's body. "Dr. McMillan," the pediatrician called Arthur for a private conversation. "I need to ask some questions. The girl shows signs of severe physical and psychological trauma. What is her family situation like?" Arthur looked through the glass at Izzy, who was sleeping sedated in the hospital bed, and made a decision that would change everything. "Doctor, there's something I need to tell you. I suspect she's being abused by her grandfather." While Arthur was talking to the doctor, Frank took advantage of a moment of distraction to approach Melissa in the hallway. "Girl," he whispered, "your father is sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. This isn't going to end well for anyone, especially for Izzy." "What do you mean?" Melissa felt a shiver of fear. "Let's just say that some people don't like it when their activities are questioned. If your father continues to be too curious—" Frank didn't finish the sentence, but the threat was clear. That's when Melissa made a courageous decision. That same night, when they returned from the hospital, she pretended to go to sleep, but stayed watching from the window. As expected, Frank went out to meet his accomplices in the back of the property. Silently, Melissa went down and hid close enough to hear the conversation. "The old man is starting to suspect," said the woman Arthur had seen before. "Jurema thinks we should speed up the plan." "Not yet," Frank replied. "He's going to pay. A man like him can't see a child suffering. It's our weak point. And if he doesn't pay, asked the other man, then we use plan B. The girl disappears, they think it's a kidnapping, they pay the ransom, and then they never hear from her again. Melissa had to cover her mouth to avoid screaming. They were planning to kidnap Izzy. She ran back into the house and woke up her father immediately. "Dad, you need to hear me. They're going to kidnap Izzy." Arthur listened to everything his daughter had discovered, and the blood ran cold in his veins. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. But when they tried to locate Frank, they discovered that he had disappeared during the early hours of the morning, taking all his belongings. The next morning, Sarah appeared desperately at Arthur's house. "Officer, please, where's my daughter? My father said she was in the hospital, but when I went there, they said she had already been discharged." "Sarah, sit down. I need to tell you some things about your father." Arthur revealed everything, the blackmail, the threats, the kidnapping plan. Sarah listened in silence, tears streaming down her face, until she couldn't contain herself any longer. "I knew it," she cried, desperate. "I always knew he was capable of terrible things, but I never had the courage to face him. And now my daughter is paying for my cowardice." "Sarah," Arthur said gently, "there's something else you need to know, something I discovered when I spoke to the doctor at the hospital." She looked up, preparing for another terrible revelation. "Frank isn't really your father, is he?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah began to tremble, and Arthur realized that he had touched the core of a secret she had kept for years. How do you know?" she whispered. "The ages don't add up, Sarah. You're 34, Izzy is 6. If Frank was really your father, he would have had you very young. But mostly, the doctor noticed that Izzy doesn't have any genetic characteristics compatible with the Miller family." Sarah broke down, all the years of lying and emotional blackmail finally coming to the surface. He found me when I was 15 years old, pregnant and with nowhere to live. He offered me shelter in exchange for pretending to be his daughter. He said that it would be easier to get help from the government that way, that people would have more pity. And you accepted because you had no choice. I was a scared girl. I didn't know what to do. And when Izzy was born, he said that if I told anyone the truth, he would report me for fraud and take my daughter away. Sarah sobbed. For all these years he controlled me with that lie. He made me believe that I was nothing without him. Arthur held Sarah's trembling hands. "You're nothing like what he said. You're a mother who did what she could to protect her daughter in an impossible situation." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Frank. "Officer." His voice sounded different, more desperate. "I need $50,000 by tonight, or the girl suffers the consequences." "Where is she?" Arthur demanded. "In a safe place. For now. The money buys her safety. If you hurt a hair on her head, you're not in a position to make threats, officer. The money. Tonight. I'll call with instructions." The call ended, leaving everyone in despair. But Sarah, for the first time in years, showed a strength that Arthur didn't expect. "I know where he is," she said, wiping away her tears. "I know all the hideouts he uses, and this time I'm going to face him. Sarah, it's dangerous. Officer, my daughter is in the hands of a man who isn't even related to us, who has used us for years for his criminal schemes. I've spent 6 years of my life afraid of him, but I'm not going to spend another minute." That's how Sarah guided Arthur and Melissa to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix, where they found Izzy tied up but unharmed, guarded by Judrama, while Frank negotiated with other members of the group. The final confrontation was quick. Frank, cornered and realizing that his scheme had collapsed, tried one last emotional blackmail. "Sarah, you can't do this to me. I raised you, gave you a home when no one else wanted you. You enslaved me," Sarah replied, her voice firm for the first time. "Used my daughter, controlled me with lies, destroyed our dignity. But it's over. Today, this ends. Months later, with Frank and his accomplices facing criminal charges, Sarah and Izzy's life finally began to rebuild. Arthur, inspired by their courage, offered Sarah not only work, but the opportunity to resume her studies. "You always said you wanted to be a teacher," he recalled. "It's never too late to start over." But I don't even have a high school diploma." "Then let's start there. Melissa can help with the lessons, and I'll cover the costs of your studies." Izzy, through therapy and a lot of love, gradually regained her trust. The genuine laughter returned to Arthur's garden, but now it had a different sound. It was the laughter of a child who finally felt truly safe. One afternoon, 6 months later, Arthur watched Sarah studying at the kitchen table while Izzy and Melissa played in the garden. The company had recovered. The reputation had been restored, but more important than anything, they had become a family. "Thank you," Sarah said, looking up from her books, "for everything." "Don't thank me. You taught me something I had forgotten since Claire died." "What?" "That sometimes saving someone is the best way to save yourself too." From the garden came the sound of Izzy's laughter, crystalline, genuine, full of life. It was the sound of hope, the sound of a future finally free from fear.